Hi, everyone, and welcome to Career Conversations. My name is Izelle,
I'm Dakota.
And I'm Laura.
and we're so excited for you to be joining us, sitting in with us as we talk about things career. Today's topic we're going to dive into is specifically on virtual interviewing. We thought this was really important given the situation. Obviously, we're talking to you from the comfort of our own homes because of COVID that is kind of happening in current state. And so now more than ever, we find that virtual interviewing is becoming a very pressing topic. And we just feel like it would be really good for us to hopefully give you some tips and feedback and just kind of things that we've maybe experienced along the way during our own experiences. And hopefully you can learn from them. So that's what we're going to be speaking to you all about today. And I don't even know where to get started with this. I think it's such a big topic, but we don't want to take up too much time. So where should we get started? Has anybody here ever done a virtual type interview before?
I've done a virtual interview and then I've done Skype interviews, or maybe it was like through Zoom. But it's a little bit, I would say it's definitely different than the in-person interview because, you're speaking to someone face to face and they get to know, I guess they get to know better, like your personality. And I think you're just better in person when you're interviewing. And when you're interviewing through like virtual, it's really hard for them to kind of get to know you. And you feel like you have some like lens up and you don't really know what to expect. So it's a little bit intimidating because you're not really sure, like when you walk into a room, you kind of feel the vibe of the room. You kind of get a sense of what that's like. You can't do that in the virtual interview. So it's very different.
Yeah,
Very different.
I agree. I've never personally interviewed virtually, like video conferencing. I have done phone interviews. Maybe that's something we can talk about too as well, because I think what we're finding a lot is that phone interviews are also very common, right? Before you can go in person, a lot of employers use a phone interview to kind of pre-screen and then would either invite you in person, or in this case, it might be like through Skype or Zoom or any sort of other video conferencing. But you make a really good point, Laura, because I think at least from an interviewer's perspective, and I've done this, I've had an interview before where some of my candidates interviewed in person and some of them interviewed via video conferencing. And that's definitely a challenge. I mean, you're right. I think it's very different when somebody's able to kind of like be in person and you can kind of feed off of each other's energy, but it's really hard
Right.
when you're not, right? So I find that if somebody is doing video conferencing, just be very mindful of like the energy that you're projecting, because it's really hard to be engaging sometimes. I think it's really easy for people to kind of, or maybe more easily for people to check out if it's video versus like if you were in person. So I think it's even more important that people are aware of that, right? And figure out how can I become, or how can I come across as being engaging and effective even with like a screen between us. So
Right.
yeah, that's really good insight. And hopefully people kind of start thinking about that. Like how am I projecting myself? Am I engaging enough? Am I going to hold people's attention? So that should be definitely something people be mindful of.
But
Good point.
it's really interesting because we watch a lot of like TV. We watch a lot of what is it? If you're watching someone like every day, like if you're watching, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, you see them, and you get to know who they are, but you really don't know who they are. You know what
Right.
I mean? So I
Hmm.
kind of feel like interviewing is kind of like you really want them, like you really want the job, but it's really hard to like sell yourself in a sense where it's like, well, this is who I am, this is whatever, but it's just, yeah, the challenge of like talking through a screen and not be able to feel the energies of people, I
Hmm.
guess, and if you believe in that, but it's very awkward sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Dakota? Have you had any experience with virtual interviewing?
I personally have never done like a virtual interview or a phone call. My interviews have always been in person or even very non-traditional interviewing where it's just you put in the application and you get the job. It's how I think coffee shops usually do that, and that was my first job, so that's how that went. But my significant other is currently going through the process of doing these virtual interviews. So first they did a phone interview with, the HR. And even then, my tip to him was to dress up, really dress the part, even though that person's not actually seeing you. I think you can sometimes psych yourself out. And if you're dressed really nicely, then you're going to feel more professional and hopefully speak more professionally, even though you're in your safe space, you're in your home. Because it is really hard to distinguish right now the difference between like your home life and your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
So just dressing the part that you would normally dress for an interview will at least bring some of that aspect into your interviewing skills. Also, the other tip, when he did the Zoom interview, I would recommend that someone tries to log into that Zoom link well before, because companies now have like strict protocols and security measures that they're putting on these Zoom links. And my significant other didn't have a Zoom account, and I know usually you can just click on the link without having an account and it'll bring you in. This particular employer did not let that happen. You had to have an account with the email that you used when you were doing all your applications, just a lot of things that we didn't think about. And so 5 minutes before the interview, we're scrambling to try to figure out why he can't get into the Zoom link. They don't have a phone number that you can just call if this happens. So there were a lot of things that we had to learn on the fly. So definitely just trying out that Zoom link beforehand is a really great idea. And then just dressing the part. And then thinking about your atmosphere, especially behind you. You don't want a lot of distracting things behind you. You want the interviewer to kind of focus in on you. I think even, it might be distracting as an interviewee and you might check out, but even as an interviewer, you're probably more likely to check out and not really listen to what that person's saying. So having less distractions, probably the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Room in the back.
Right? Yeah. If you have, yeah, I think that whole frame, it's so important to think about though, because this is one of the things that I share with people. It's like when you first you have to find a place, right? And when you find a place, like set it up like you were in that interview, and then take a look at what's behind me. Like, do I have posters? Do I need to tidy up? Because it looks really messy back there. People look at that. I know more than ever, there is many meetings that we are doing that is video conferencing. And it's interesting to kind of see like other people's background and what they have going on. So if you have people at home, you probably want to give them a heads up, right? That you're going to be interviewing so that they're not in your space or going in your background. So I think being very aware of your frame, what you have going on, making sure there's no distractions. But again, like, is this your time for you to tidy up? Do you have a poster or something in the background that you don't want other people to see? So that is like really, really good. And then the other point that you make is dressing the part. I know when I go in classrooms and do classroom presentations, I kind of talk to that with a lot of the students that I'm speaking to. And it kind of sounds silly in a lot of people. I mean, I think with video conferencing, it might make a little sense, right? Because you know that you're going to be on screen and they're going to see you. So making sure you look professional from the head up. I just total, right? Because we've all seen those bloopers out there. We've all seen those articles being shared about the bloopers. So I just think dressing professionally fully is really important. But also like with phone interviews, it's really important as well, because I think you're right. It kind of puts you in that mindset. And in this time, our worlds kind of are collided, right? Our professional and our personal. So how can you make sure that they're separate? How can you put yourself in that mindset? And I'm a really big believer that if you like dress in something that you feel comfortable and confident in, that you just kind of exude that sense of confidence. So I always think like, even if it's a phone interview or a video, you still need to pay attention to the things that you're putting on and make sure it's something that you feel comfortable and you feel really confident in. So that can hopefully project that type of energy, whether it's through the phone or video conferencing.
Yeah, who would have thought that there's safe things that you have to really think about for the interview because, like you mentioned, Dakota, like the technology is like so important because if you don't have that, you know, who knows if you get the second opportunity to like, you know, for them to reschedule like an interview. But dressing, what's in the back, preparing for it, like there's so many things to consider.
First impression, like if you can't figure out your own technology, that kind of is sending out that message to those interviewers and the employer that you don't know how to use technology. Even though we're all learning right now, it's just kind of your first impression, and you don't know what your employer will think about that. So
yeah, that technology piece is really key. And I know that you had mentioned the Zoom, and so I guess when people are being scheduled for an interview, obviously they're going to find out what type of platform, video conferencing platform individuals would use. And you're right, like if you don't have a Zoom account, maybe it's good that you create an account, or if it's through, I'm trying to think, like a WebEx or Google or GoToMeetings or whatever type of video conferencing it is, it might be worthwhile to take a look, you know, is there a free account that I can create? Like if I click on it, do I have to download something? I know sometimes if it's the first time I'm using a video conferencing app, sometimes I have to like download or let it run. I mean, it doesn't take super long, but something has to run so that way I can use it. So you're right, taking a look at what it is and clicking and downloading or doing whatever it is that you need to do is really important. So maybe practicing with like a friend or family member, right? So if it's Zoom that it's set up through, do you create an account? Can you set it up? Or can you have a family member send you a link and can you join? And I think seeing if you have the opportunity to practice with somebody on that platform to test it, that might be a good suggestion or piece of advice, because the last thing that you want to do is like fumble through. I think we're all, it's very common for a lot of people to have those like interview nerves, and the last thing that you want on top of the regular interview nerves is like the technology piece, right? Like, oh, why can't I get in? I'm supposed to be in my Zoom meeting right now, kind of thing. So figuring that out ahead of time is really important, because there's some employers that have the schedule, right? And you don't want a big portion of that eaten up by technology issues, which I've experienced. On the other side, I had a candidate once that it took around 7 minutes for us to start an interview because of the technology piece, and we couldn't hear and all these things. So testing, I think, is really important. Good point.
Yeah, but that's why we're here, is to help everybody, like, you know, understand all of the things that you have to consider for an interview. So there's so many pieces.
Oh, definitely.
That's just the surface right there. It's like all the preparation now that you have to kind of, you know, prepare the strategies behind interviewing. But like virtual is a little bit, it's like its own monster.
It is. Yeah. And it's not to be like a scary monster, but just be aware that there are just different things that, you know, we don't normally have to think about if we're doing something in person, but there's just other factors or other variables that we should then consider when we are doing something remotely or virtually. I had a student once who was interviewing with somebody that was located in a different state. So when he was talking about the interview, we were talking about like the time zone, because he had a question. He's like, so is it this like 10 o'clock their time or 10 o'clock my time? So then that was a whole discussion. So it's really important, right? So figuring out those details, and if somebody is located in a different time zone, I think it's okay to ask that recruiter or that HR person that you're connected with. Like, don't be afraid to ask those clarifying questions, because the last thing that you want is click on something and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really for this time, and you totally missed it. So I think it's okay for individuals, and sometimes people might feel nervous, like, is it okay to ask? Is it not? I'm always like, ask. Like, you never want to not ask and not have the questions and not be fully prepared. So if it's one of those clarifying questions to clarify, you know, time, because people are located in different time zone, then do that. If it's a Zoom link, maybe find out, is there like a backup call number just in case for some reason, I tried everything, we've done everything, it's not working. Is there at least a call-in number for a backup option? Like, those are other things that you might want to consider or take a look at, but also ask if it's available. And I feel like a lot of times those HR people are the people that are helping you set up that interview. If it's available, they're going to be happy to disclose that information. So don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions if you need to.
Yes.
Definitely.
And I didn't mean to say it was a monster, but
no, yeah. But I get what you mean. It is. It's just like I wanted to say it's like a whole other beast right now, but it's not really a beast, right? But I get what you're saying.
So whether it's like the phone, the online, or the in-person interview, it's
it's a different dynamic. Yeah, exactly. So what did we talk about? We talked about let's hear if we could summarize like the tips and advice that we shared in this quick video that we're just chatting about, maybe our own personal experiences that we've seen on both ends and just feedback in general. So we talked about dressing the part, right? Whether it's phone or whether it's video conferencing, always dress the part, dress completely, because if you feel good, hopefully you'll project that level of confidence. One of the things that I did forget to say is smiling, right? A lot of people, I think oftentimes in interviews, we get so nervous that we just forget to smile in general, but it's even more important in this platform. And it sounds silly when we say do it for phone, but I think we've had this conversation amongst each other before. And that's kind of one of the things that we talked about ourselves is, how when you're smiling, our inflections are different. And it's kind of like when we're talking to friends and family, like you can tell when somebody's really excited or really happy. So not forgetting to smile, even on a phone interview, is really important as well. So dressing the part, smiling. We talked about, what was it? Our frame, right? Being aware of your background and your surroundings. So being distraction free, so that way you don't have dogs or kiddos. I have kids, by the way, so sometimes my kids are like all over the place. But if I was interviewing, I would make sure that I would be distraction free and no TV in the background or anything like that. And again, being mindful of the background. We also talked about technology, right? How can you practice or testing? Also talked about maybe those backup, seeing if there is a dial-in option just in case. Anything else that we missed that we can kind of quickly summarize for our viewers?
I think asking questions, sorry, Dakota, but like asking questions, if you have, unclarifying of like the time or, who do I call in case something breaks down, then
yes.
Yeah.
Very good. And then what were you going to say, Dakota?
I was going to say one thing with distractions that you might not think about is also your mailman and your UPS drivers. They might knock and ring your doorbell. Please feel free to put a sign out on your door that says, hey, we're doing an interview. Please try not to knock. That's what we did when my significant other was doing his interview, because we're right by the door. It's the best place to do the interview. And so that's just one distraction that would totally throw you off of answering a question.
Yes.
It's very distracting for everyone if your doorbell rings or if there's a knock on the door. So feel free to put a sign out there that just says, hey, interview in process, please don't knock, leave package at the door.
Yeah,
so
what a great tip. Yeah, such a great tip that I didn't really think about, but you're so right, because I think a lot of us are guilty now more than ever, like ordering things online and probably getting lots of deliveries at the door. Yes. So just the fact that somebody is ringing their doorbell, and then if you have dogs, your dogs can be really great, but once that doorbell goes off, it's like a whole other story. So that's actually a really good piece of advice, or maybe even at your front door. And if you're in a room and you have other family, it might be even a good idea to put a poster on your door, right? And say, I'm in an interview, no distractions kind of thing. So some really good tips. So we hope that you have enjoyed our quick conversation on virtual interviews. Hopefully you got some good takeaways. And like Laura mentioned before, aside from this video, if you have any questions, feel free to connect with us. Our email is career.services@gccaz.edu, and we'd be happy to help you with interviewing or anything else that we do in general. And so that we're going to go ahead and sign off until next time. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.